What's up, YouTube Revolution? ZombfectedGaming 349 at your fingertips. So today, I want to reflect back on how good the PlayStation 3 era was in terms of graphical leaps in technology and all the legendary video games back in that generation. But don't get me wrong, PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 does have some extremely beautiful graphics when it comes to ray tracing and all the photogrammetry in some of the games on PlayStation 4 and mostly PlayStation 5 running at 60 frames per second. I also did want to say about the handful of games that PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 had good, in my opinion, like Dying Light 1 and Dying Light 2. Those games helped grow my channel a lot. Also, Watch Dogs 1 and Watch Dogs 2 and Watch Dogs Legion as well. The Watch Dogs games, in terms of open world crime games that were on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 generation, were literally the only open world crime games that came close to being the most recent GTA competitors, so those are games I can really give credit to. And also, the Dying Light games are also one of my most favorite zombie apocalypse-like games of the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 generation. I also need to give Red Dead Redemption 2 some credit as well, since that was one of the most realistic video games I had ever played in my life, and I was eagerly waiting for a new Wild West game, since Wild Western open world crime games are a rare gem. I also had countless hours of fun with Red Dead Online and Grand Theft Auto Online with friends throughout the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 generation, and I think that pretty much is all of the credit I can give these two generations of gaming. But let's now talk about why the PlayStation 3 will forever be one of the most legendary video game generations of consoles of my life, with the leap in tech from PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3 in all of the legendary video games, and why we need to give it more credit than PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. Let's start off with talking about some of the fantastic Call of Duty games that rose the franchise to fame with the golden era, starting with Call of Duty Modern Warfare 1, and Call of Duty World at War, and Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and Call of Duty Black Ops, and Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, and Call of Duty Black Ops 2. All of those Call of Duty games are mainly strictly on the PlayStation 3, and they were when Call of Duty could be revolutionary every year and not getting old 1 week of playing, in my opinion. All of today's Call of Duty games, mainly from the PlayStation 4 era, starting in 2013 to now, and going into the PlayStation 5 generation, I get bored of those Call of Duty games after a week of playing sometimes, or less. But I am giving this year's Call of Duty Black Ops 6 some credit, since I am 5th prestige, and this is the furthest I have prestige so far since Call of Duty Black Ops 2 in 2012, and Black Ops 2 is the last Call of Duty I have ever master prestiged on. But now let's talk about the Grand Theft Auto competitors that I mainly enjoyed from that generation. We are talking games that allow us to free roam and let us steal cars and cause as much crime and chaos as possible. I remember Saints Row 2 was a fantastic Grand Theft Auto competitor with the fantastic Grand Theft Auto 4 in 2008, and also Saints Row the 3rd was also a good open world crime game in 2011, and I also enjoyed Just Cause 2 in 2010. Also, this isn't particularly an open world crime game, but Mercenaries 2 was a great one too. It's more of on the lines of a open world war crime game, since the Mercenaries games are set in military war zones. In Mercenaries 2 World in Flames, you can cause so much chaos and blow up any building you want in the Mercenaries games. And also, I did want to say, Just Cause is very similar to the Mercenaries games in terms of the genre and setting. And like I said, I do like to call this an open world military war crime setting. That's my way of calling it. And that's pretty much all the open world GTA styled games I can think of at the moment, and I think there's more on the PlayStation 3, but that's pretty much it for that and stuff. There's probably more that I have played, but I think I slightly forgotten because there were so many games I played on the PlayStation 3 back then, and those are all pretty much I can just think of at the top of my head. Now let's talk about some other amazing first-person shooters and how much better and grittier the military games were back then in the PlayStation 3 generation compared to today's shooters that have to be a copy of Fortnite's colorful style. Let's start with SOCOM Confrontation. It was a realistic tactical third-person shooter, and yes, I know I wanted to say first-person, but this also falls under the category of military games I also want to reference as well. We also got Battlefield Bad Company 1, and we also got Battlefield Bad Company 2, and Battlefield Bad Company 2 Vietnam, and a game people probably don't know much about. It was a really gritty military first-person shooter, and that is Operation Flashpoint Dragon Rising. And I also forgot to throw in as well, but Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, and I know Battlefield 4 did launch for PlayStation 4 as well, but Battlefield 4 did look pretty good even on PlayStation 3, but most of all, I do want to say Battlefield 3 is my most favorite Battlefield game out there, along with the Bad Company games. Now let's move on to some open world first person shooters, and it's Far Cry 2, a game that released in 2008, and it's the first Far Cry game that I have ever played, and eventually it led up to Far Cry 3 in 2012, which was also a really good story, and fantastic main villains were in there with amazing charisma. This was back when Far Cry was superb, with the first two Far Cry games I had played mainly in the PlayStation 3 generation, since they looked so good, and even till this day, they still look really good. I gotta say, Far Cry 3's PlayStation 3 version is better than the Far Cry 3 Classic Edition, which is the remastered on PlayStation 4, since that version had cut content with the co-op game mode and its multiplayer, and the co-op took place just before the main story of Far Cry 3. And the multiplayer was really fun, and I would argue it's better than Call of Duty's. And if you got some friends, I highly recommend populating a lobby and playing Far Cry 3's co-op or multiplayer together with all your friends. Now let's bring up a military third-person shooter, and that is SOCOM 4 from 2011. Now I gotta say, it didn't get the best representation back then, but it aged well, and it aged so much better than some of the shooters that we get today. I now want to turn to a Wild West game that I had really enjoyed too, and that is Call of Juarez Bound in Blood. You can think of this game as if Red Dead Redemption and Call of Duty had a baby together, since it's a linear story-driven first-person shooter game, and it also has an arcade-like multiplayer similar to Call of Duty as well. I highly recommend, if you have friends that can populate some lobbies in the multiplayer, play this multiplayer. I highly recommend. If you like Red Dead Redemption and you like Call of Duty like multiplayer, play it together. And also, there are two other Call of Juarez games that had come out after Call of Juarez Bound in Blood, but the one after Bound in Blood is called Call of Juarez The Cartel and didn't do so good. But to me, in my opinion, it was a decently interesting Call of Juarez game set in the modern day, and it felt like as if a Call of Duty game was focusing on drug warfare and crime with cops and robbers, and I also enjoyed its multiplayer as well, which felt exactly like a Call of Duty game. And so if you want to play a Call of Duty like a cops and robbers like Call of Duty, try out Call of Juarez The Cartel's multiplayer. And Call of Juarez Gunslinger was the next Call of Juarez after the Cartel, and it had returned back to its Wild West roots, and the gameplay in that game was so arcade Wild West shooter like fun, and oh man, it was really good, but sadly, the multiplayer was not in that game. And that right there is pretty much all of the games I can think of that came to my mind when thinking of PlayStation 3 games. I'm sure there's many more that I enjoyed, and it's definitely not easy to think of so many countless fun games that I played during the PlayStation 3 era. But now, let's talk about the PlayStation 3's evolution from the jump from PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3. And the PlayStation 2 had some really good games too, which some were close to feeling like watching a movie. GTA San Andreas was definitely for sure one of them. But with the dawn of HD flat screen TVs and people getting rid of their tube TVs and PlayStation 3 featuring the first HDMI cables and just the graphics for the first time, it just felt like we were playing movies but through video games. And when I had saw that, I had begged my dad when I first lived with him, I would like a PlayStation 3 since everything looked like a movie, and my dad was like, no, you don't need it, you have enough video games already. But yeah, that's how good the graphical enhancements felt in terms of the leap from PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3. It felt like a massive leap. When you were comparing some of the acting on PlayStation 3, like the voice acting in video games compared to PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 1, PlayStation 3's just budget in terms of, evolution, it just was amazingly a step up from PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 1. Also, one thing that we need to also really give PlayStation 3 credit to is that there was PlayStation Network didn't cost anything. It was completely free. And also, what was also extremely amazing too is that there wasn't really any microtransactions on PlayStation 3 back then. Most of our games and stuff allowed us to earn whatever the heck we wanted through the game, and we did not have to spend extra real life money on a game that we've already paid for. Now let's get back to talking about graphical enhancements and the evolution for console to console. With the PlayStation 3 to the PlayStation 4, it didn't feel like a huge leap of evolution, but we could definitely tell graphical enhancements like lighting and draw distances were getting better, and PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5 didn't feel like a huge leap either, since it was just some better frame rate and a bit of better draw distances as well. But if you compare PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3 draw distances, the PlayStation 3 draw distances is so much larger than the PlayStation 3 jump to PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 draw distances. And what I mean by that is, with the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2, there's a lot of fog in terms of draw distance. The more closer you get, the more things start to pan out and you'll be able to see things more. But on PlayStation 3, that's when draw distances became a lot more you can see. So let's say if you're on the other side of a cliff and you looked in the distance from the cliff, you can see a city skyline in the distance. You can see that city skyline. But if you're on that cliff and you're playing a PlayStation 2 game or a PlayStation 1 game, you will not be able to see the city skyline from that cliff. And on PlayStation 3, you can see city skylines, for example. Like in GTA 4, for example, you can see city skylines from, let's say if you're in Broker in GTA 4, you can see the skyline of Algonquin. But let's say if you were in Los Santos, in GTA San Andreas, and you're looking towards Las Venturas, or you're trying to look towards San Fierro, you cannot see those draw distances in the distance. It's why PlayStation 3 will forever always feel like it was the biggest leap in gaming I have ever seen in my life, since that jump in technology from PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3 in terms of graphics and voice acting in games and audio quality and etc. It will always be way better than the jump from PlayStation 3 to PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5. But don't get me wrong, like I said, PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 do have their respectful rights in evolution of gaming as well. But I think that's pretty much it for my video on why the PlayStation 3's generation was such a legendary generation, and I think Sony needs to eventually give this generation some credit in the future when it finally turns 20. We should at least get some sort of PlayStation 3 backwards compatibility, since PlayStation 3 discs are Blu-ray discs, and there should be no excuse for a PlayStation 3 disc to not work in a PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5. I don't understand why they did this to the PlayStation 3 era, man. This is such disrespect for a amazing generational leap from PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3. PlayStation 3, I think, is forever probably one of my most favorite generations of gaming. I just think that Sony needs to do something for the PlayStation 3 20th anniversary. Just do something good. Do something good for it. I think I remember back in 2018, they released some sort of PlayStation 1 sort of console thing or whatever it was. And I heard it didn't do so well, but I know some PlayStation 1 fans loved it. And I think They should release a brand new PlayStation 3 for the 20th anniversary of PlayStation 3. They have to do something for it. It is one of the best consoles of all time. Don't let this console go to waste, Sony. Please don't let it like fade out and be extinct and stuff. Please do something about this console generation. We need to see something for PlayStation 3 again. But anyways, if you all enjoyed this and agreed with me, consider subscribing to the channel and dropping a like on this video. And ding that bell icon really hard so I can always stay within fast reach of your fingertips when new uploads arrive. ZombfectedGaming 349 over and out.